Turn around when it is safe to do so. In 200 yards, turn right. Turn right. You have arrived at your destination.
Great to see you. We're shooting a documentary about car culture in the UK, and I need a second driver. You've made a name for yourself, and it would be great to have you aboard. It's simple. You drive, I tell the story. Let's do it. From Aston Martin to McLaren and Bentley, Great Britain is home to over a century of automotive excellence. I'm Rebecca Dawson. Welcome to British Racing Green, a documentary celebrating that history. The Aston Martin DB5 Vantage was the quintessential Grand Tourer of the 1960s. Combining British engineering and Italian design. The Vantage featured side-draft carburetors and a refined camshaft profile, capable of a blistering top speed of 162 miles an hour. In 1960... The clean lines of Superleggera's bodywork, reclining seats and wool carpets created a car that was luxurious as well as fast. This car would form the basis for the DB range, with later cars improving on the design in many ways. But none would ever achieve the sheer, iconic perfection of the Vantage.
In 200 yards, turn left. Turn left.
For all of its beauty and engineering perfection, only 65 of these beautiful machines would ever be built. If you own one, you own a piece of British history.
In 200 yards, you will arrive at your destination.
The silver DB5 would be immortalized in half a century of cinema. The classic Aston Martin. But in 2016, a new DB was unveiled, heralding the dawn of Aston Martin's second century. The DB11 is the first production turbocharged Aston Martin. But is it a worthy successor to that legacy? The short answer is yes. It's bold, responsive, and agile. It's perhaps the best GT chassis in the world. And listen to it. Able to hit 60 miles an hour in 3.5 seconds, the DB11's 5.2-litre twin-turbo V12 boasts a top speed of over 200 miles an hour. The DB11 is not the fastest car in the world, but then it's not trying to be. It's sophisticated, effortless luxury. It's an Aston Martin. The DB11's front strakes channel air to create a virtual spoiler, providing downforce without compromising the car's clean lines. Brilliant. Most importantly, I think, the DB11 proves that Aston Martin is ready for another century of beautiful cars. And I can't wait. Beautiful as they are, Aston Martins are only one of many cars made in the United Kingdom. Let's see what else is out there. This is shaping up nicely. Time for a change of pace, though. At least at first. The next segment is about Land Rover, and we'll be starting out with the Type 3. Land Rover, the British sports utility vehicle. But before that, they were actual utility vehicles. Solid, tough trucks, unstoppable over almost any terrain.
In 400 yards, turn left.
The Land Rover Type 3 marks the point where that shift begins, and we'll be looking at what that meant.
Turn left.
Land Rovers have taken on almost every task imaginable. They've been generators, tractors and ambulances. They've brought peace and carried medicines to disaster zones. They've even been buses. Over 500,000 Series 3s were built, and over 70% of those are still on the road today. They were extensively exported and built under license abroad. Belgium, South Africa, even Australia and New Zealand. With a robust chassis and signature Land Rover engineering, the Type 3 also marked the first time that buyers could choose interior options, like seat box protectors and cubby boxes. That trend continued, and by 1982, Land Rover were offering the county-spec Type 3. Leisure drivers could choose from such luxuries as all-cloth seats, soundproofing, and tinted glass. The trend was increasingly clear, and the future of the Land Rover was starting to take shape. If you squinted, you could already see the shape of the first sports utility vehicle, the Range Rover. While the stock Type 3 would never be particularly fast uphill, there is almost no hill that it couldn't climb, or dam for that matter, if you've put a proper winch on it. In 1978, a Series 3 was custom-built for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. It only had 1,892 miles on the clock when it was auctioned into private hands. And it was in perfect condition. It would be. After all, she trained as a mechanic in the 1940s and will likely remain the only royal able to strip and rebuild an engine.
Turn left. In 200 yards, you will arrive at your destination.
Along with the Range Rover, others would follow. Discovery, Defender, and the Freelander. Each a more sophisticated and enjoyable utility vehicle. But none of them were a replacement for the Type 3. They were a different kind of car. The Type 3 was arguably the first sports utility vehicle, an evolution of the design that would lead ultimately to this. The Bowler Nemesis, an off-road racing vehicle that turned into a production SUV, the Nemesis EXR. It sports a turbocharged 5-litre Land Rover Jaguar engine, crammed into a carbon fibre chassis with integral roll cage. It even has the grille, headlights and rear lights from a Range Rover. If you want to see what the Type 3 would be like if it ever stopped doing important things, this is it. And it's beautiful. This is an all-terrain supercar. That's the only fair description for this. But that's what you get when you build an SUV with Land Rover DNA. Hope you're enjoying yourself. I know I am. It's great to be able to just focus on telling the story while someone else handles the driving for once. Let's get to the next one. This time, it's Lotus. Lotus Engineering Limited began as many stories in British engineering do. In an old barn. The first Lotus cars were offered as kits. You built them yourself. From 1962, they began to actually build the cars themselves. The Elan Sprint showed exactly what they intended to do. Built around a steel backbone with a fiberglass chassis, the Sprint weighed in at a meager 687 kilos parked on the curb. On the road, this translated into brilliant agility and fantastic performance. Designer Colin Chapman famously said, "Adding power makes you faster on the straights. Subtracting weight makes you faster everywhere." He knew what he was talking about.
In 100 yards, in 100 yards, turn left.
Widely hailed as one of the greatest sports cars of the 1960s, the Elan would be closely studied and emulated, inspiring such masterpieces as the Mazda MX-5. The Elan has all the energy, style, and enthusiasm you would expect. Bold, quick, and fun. So much so that they put it in the name. The Elan Sprint was a financial as well as an engineering success for Lotus, validating their approach to design and resulting in a whole family of light, agile roadsters. Which brings us to this, the Lotus Exige. It's heavier than the Elan, admittedly, but it's faster, much, much faster. Touch the pedal, the Exige responds with instant, relentless acceleration, as you'd expect. With a 0 to 60 time of 3.8 seconds and a top speed of 170 before upgrades and tuning, the Exige is uncompromising. And there's no power steering, so you can really feel the road. A genuinely thrilling drive, and one that isn't afraid to demand you take it seriously.
In 400 yards, turn left. Turn left. 200 yards, you will arrive at your destination.
And with rumoured launches of 2 new cars in 2020, Lotus looks set to push the benchmark of the experienced sports car well into the next century.
So, my boy Jamie's been eager to get you behind the wheel of his cars. He wants to talk skill driving without having to drive at the same time. Go see him.
Done much rallying? That's a joke. We've all seen what you've been up to. We're doing the next bit on location. You'll see why when you get there.
In 400 yards, you will arrive at your destination.
Ford, that most American of cars. But the Ford Escort, oh, that's British. And more than that, the Escort would become for many synonymous with Group B. In the 70s, Ford had embraced that destiny so firmly that they'd begun their own championships to find new drivers. Drivers for cars like the RS 1800. This was a car designed explicitly for rallying, with a powerful fuel-injected 1790cc Cosworth BDE engine. Homologation rules required that all cars entered into the group be production, so Ford built 200 of them. The RS 1800 raced to victory after victory across the rallying world, on almost every continent and across every terrain type imaginable. This car was basically unbeatable. The RS 1800 brought home 17 World Rally Championship victories for Ford. So, of course, Ford set out to design a better one. The RS 200 Evolution was their answer. A purpose-built rally car designed to do one thing: win Group B. With a 1.8 turbocharged Ford Cosworth BDT engine and all-wheel drive, the RS200 had perhaps the best suspension platform of any car of its era. The chassis was fiberglass from Reliant, and a massive Ford parts bin was raided to give the car that iconic look. But while the car had potential, turbo lag at low RPM and a poor power-to-weight ratio meant that it never placed better than third. The end of Group B in the mid-80s meant the end of the RS200 as a rallying car. Fortunately, Ford built over 200 as part of the homologation requirements for Group B, so you can still find them, if you're lucky. You know, I really like this car. Not that I'd want to drive it for too long. Squeeze yourself in there and let's see just how fast you can make it go. Which won't be too fast. But hey, I could be surprised. The Peel P50 has the dubious honour of being the smallest production car in the world. A one-door microcar coupe, featuring a 42cc air-cooled engine capable of a heinous 38 miles an hour. And a handle, so you can pick it up and carry it with you when you get to work. And keep in mind that this is the production version. The prototype had the single wheel at the front. Why would you think that was a good idea? In 2010, though, production restarted at Sutton in Ashfield. So, if you'd like to own the modern incarnation of this, I suppose you can. Hey there! How about a car with some actual legroom and some actual speed? This section's about what happened when McLaren decided to make a road car. You're going to enjoy this. The track and the road have very different requirements. For McLaren, that was a challenge they were more than willing to embrace. In 1988, they set out to create the finest sports car the world has ever seen. By 1993, they had achieved their goal, and the honestly fantastic F1 was the result. 106 would be built across all variants, and it remains one of the very best road cars ever made. The F1 has no turbocharger. That would have compromised the driving experience, increased complexity, and resulted in turbo lag. The F1 is a naturally aspirated supercar, one of the fastest in the world, in fact. Everything about this car is innovative, from the carbon fiber monocoque to the central driver position. McLaren threw the book away when they designed the F1. Then they wrote a better one. The F1's monocoque chassis is incredibly lightweight, only 100 kilos all told, which posed a significant challenge because carbon fiber and fiberglass aren't great insulators. So, McLaren lined the entire engine compartment with gold. In 1998, the F1 prototype set the world record for fastest production car, a record that would stand for 2 decades until the Koenigsegg CCR claimed the crown. McLaren's racing heritage is so deeply ingrained in this machine that when they took it to Le Mans in 1995 and faced off against purpose-built racing machines, they won. So, with something like the F1 to live up to, where do you go next? Well, you throw the book away again and write an even better one. The result is the McLaren P1, a hybrid electric sports car that stands head and shoulders above the F1. The P1 GTR will hit 60 miles an hour in 2.4 seconds. That's 0.7 seconds faster than the F1. That's an eternity for a supercar. The P1 GTR will hit 60 miles an hour in 2.4 seconds. That's 0.7 seconds faster than the F1. That's an eternity for a supercar. The car's blistering performance is delivered by a twin-turbo V8, supplemented by a McLaren ECU electric motor and instant power assist system. And they do mean instant. Remember those problems with turbo lag? McLaren solved that with the hybrid drive. While the turbos build pressure, the electric motor drives the wheels. No turbo lag, just torque. And because it's a hybrid, it has an all-electric range. Running on batteries alone, that's 6.2 miles. A bit more if you're going downhill. I quite like sleeper cars. Did Alex ever tell you the story of what we got up to in Colorado? There was this sleeper car competition, you see. Let's just say no one was ready for the Sunbeam. Lotus never quite let go of the upgrade game. So in addition to building their own supercars, they upgraded cars from other marques too. The Lotus Carlton was one such aftermarket upgrade. Lotus took a respectable four-door Vauxhall saloon and turned it into a supercar. From the outside, there are a few signs that this is something special. Wider wheel arches, that sort of thing. But under the bonnet, that's where the magic starts. Engine capacity was increased to 3.6 litres, and twin Garrett T25 turbochargers were added. The engine block was reinforced, and new crankshafts were forged by Opel and machined in Germany.
At the roundabout, take the third exit.
The tyres were widened, and the tyre compound from the Lotus Esprit was used. To handle camber change issues, they put in the self-leveling suspension from the Opel Senator. The only upgrade they didn't put in was an electronic speed limiter. All of this resulted in the Lotus Carlton, designated Type 104 by Lotus. A 177 miles per hour supercar, masquerading as a four-door saloon. Only 950 of these custom gems were built, and they've become something of a modern classic. The Lotus Carlton was an example of how to turn a saloon into a supercar, but that's not the only thing Lotus got up to. In 1979, Chrysler approached Lotus to create a strict rally version of their Sunbeam three-door hatchback. Lotus, as you might imagine, rather enjoyed the challenge. They took the rear-wheel drive hatchback and changed everything that matters. They stiffened the suspension, improved the anti-roll bars, and widened the transmission tunnel. Performance was increased by fitting a 2.2-litre version of the Lotus 911 slant four-cylinder engine, resulting in an impressive 250 brake horsepower, up from a meager 105 on the original. The Lotus Sunbeam was revealed to the public in 1979 in Geneva to widespread praise in the motoring media. More importantly, the Lotus Sunbeam saw racing success too. In 1980, Henri Toivonen won the 29th Lombard RAC Rally in his Sunbeam. It almost makes you wonder if Lotus should do more conversions. It's a silly question, actually. Lotus should do more conversions. In fact, I'll call them right now.
I speak indiscreet, cause talk is cheap. Then I get deep, think complete. Pulled with a zinc, never weak, or obsolete. they never grow old. Techniques, speaking antiques, better than something brand new. Resist original in the wild. Style I have much more value. Classical, too intelligent to be radical. Masterful, never irrelevant, mathematical. Here's some souvenirs for all the years you fought and sought the thoughts and ideas. It's cool when you freak to the beat.